Okay, let's unpack this. For most of our deep dives, we focus on a single technology or maybe a niche market.
Case-specific events, yeah.
Exactly. But today, we are casting the net really wide. We're tackling something huge, a snapshot of the entire global state of affairs during Christmas 2025.
And it's a moment in time that's just defined by this enormous, almost contradictory tension.
It is, and I think that tension is really the key insight we can pull from this stack of sources we have in front of us.
hmm We've got articles on international diplomacy, stark reports from active conflict zones, detailed economic data, and, these really powerful human stories.
And they don't just blend into one simple narrative, do they?
Not at all. Instead, they capture a world that's simultaneously struggling with these persistent, often brutal conflicts, while somehow, somewhere, finding pockets of genuine, resilient hope.
That dual reality, I think that's our mission today. We want to cut through the noise and extract what the prevailing global mood actually is. It's all about understanding this high-stakes balancing act that's defining late 2025.
Well, what's so fascinating about the source material here is how it forces you to look at the world through two completely different lenses.
Go on.
On one hand, you have the ancient, almost sacred symbolism of the holiday season. And on the other, you have the immediate, harsh, geopolitical and economic realities playing out in real time.
And that extreme juxtaposition, that's what stands out right away. We see a place like Bethlehem finally lighting up for a major celebration. But that brightness, that joy, it only makes sense when you remember what happened just 2 years ago.
Exactly. The sources are very clear on this. They recall that the central image from back then was a nativity scene where Jesus was placed not in a manger, but directly in the rubble of Gaza.
An incredibly powerful political and spiritual statement.
It is. And it shows us just how conditional, how fragile global peace and hope really are right now. So I think these sources are a perfect illustration of these rapid global shifts, both, backward into conflict and forward toward some kind of fragile relief.
Let's start exactly there, in Bethlehem, the place of the Nativity. The source material frames this year as a really significant, if cautious, return to light.
Yes.
Bethlehem is experiencing its first major Christmas celebrations in 2 years. That number 2 years, it just tells a story right there.
It's a whole story. To really appreciate the current atmosphere, you have to contextualize the recent past. The period right after the outbreak of the Gaza war was one of profound mourning.
The sources painted a devastating picture of those Christmases.
They did. They were described not as celebrations, but as a dance of death in the streets. There were virtually no people, no joyful sounds, no bright Christmas tree in Manger Square.
That must have been an incredible psychological and spiritual burden for the local population. Can we just expand on that nativity scene in the rubble for a moment? The political symbolism of that is just immense.
Oh, it was a conscious, powerful act by the Christian community to show their solidarity with the suffering in Gaza. It wasn't just a commentary on the immediate conflict, it was a global message.
A message that said what?
That the place of Christ's birth was grieving alongside its neighbors. It transformed a symbol of peace into a symbol of protest against violence. The absence of traditional joy just underscored the collective trauma.
So if that was the atmosphere then, how is the current mood manifesting now? The sources suggest a really dramatic change because of the ceasefire.
The change is palpable. Manger Square is now brightly lit. The traditional symbols are back. The atmosphere is lighter, and it reflects this collective exhalation of relief among the local population.
It's important to remember that the Palestinian Christians there are deeply connected to the suffering in Gaza.
Deeply. And this period of ceasefire allowed them a small, crucial space to focus on the traditional meaning of the season, rather than just constant fear.
And what about the demographic of the celebration? You mentioned a unified local spirit. Did the sources focus on that community integration?
Absolutely. This was highlighted as a moment of genuine community relief cutting across religious lines. The celebration involved both Palestinian Christians and Palestinian Muslims.
That unity is a powerful local statement of resilience.
And shared cultural identity. The sources specifically describe the traditional parade by the Scouts, a loud, joyful display, complete with bagpipes and drums marching through the streets.
Bagpipes. That's a surprising detail.
It is, isn't it? It's a very old tradition in the region, actually, adopted from European military bands. But that noise, that celebratory volume, it's the total antithesis of the dance of death silence of previous years.
It signifies life.
It signifies life, a collective release, and the return of a certain level of security.
But in terms of scale, was this really a return to normal? Were international tourists flocking back?
Not yet. The sources confirmed that the number of foreign tourists remained significantly below pre-conflict levels. This was primarily a local affirmation of hope.
So an internal gathering, not an international event.
Overwhelmingly so.
Yeah.
It was driven by local residents, supplemented by visitors from the surrounding West Bank communities.
And yet, it still retained this incredible diplomatic significance. The evening culminated in the traditional midnight mass, led by the Latin Patriarch. For our listeners, who is the Latin Patriarch and why is his presence so important?
The Latin Patriarch is essentially the highest-ranking Catholic representative in the Holy Land. His leadership of the Christ Mass is a major religious event, but its diplomatic weight is just enormous.
And the sources noted that many diplomats were in attendance.
Yes, representing various international governments. Their presence turns the Mass into a highly visible platform for global statements and for showing international support for the Christian presence in the region.
Which brings us to the mayor of Bethlehem's clear political demands, delivered during this moment of fragile peace. He used this platform to send a very specific message.
He was unequivocal. The core political demand was simple but profound. Treat Palestinians like human beings, grant them the same level of dignity and equality as everyone else.
And he didn't just stop at rhetoric.
No, he specifically urged the international community to move past words and recognize Palestine as a state, emphasizing that without statehood, the much-discussed two-state solution is purely theoretical. It's impossible to achieve in reality.
That's the urgent political reality underpinning the whole celebration.
And that urgency is magnified by a critical demographic detail in the sources, the continued shrinking of the Christian population there.
Right, they've been leaving for years.
For decades. Christian Palestinians have been leaving due to political instability and economic hardship. It's led to a significant reduction in their population share. I mean, historically, nearly half of Bethlehem's residents were Christians.
And today.
That proportion is far, far lower. So the community that remains is celebrating, yes, but their celebration is also a plea for a lasting solution that provides the stability and dignity they need to halt that ongoing exodus.
They're celebrating life, but also fighting cultural and spiritual displacement at the same time.
Yeah.
That deeply layered story of conditional peace in Bethlehem provides such a stark contrast as we transition immediately to Ukraine.
It's jarring.
A nation enduring its fourth war Christmas, a period characterized not by a ceasefire, but by unrelenting strategic attacks.
And this shift immediately highlights the sheer global scope of the tension we're analyzing. In Ukraine, the violence continues, but there's a significant cultural marker worth noting here.
Which is?
The country is now officially observing Christmas, according to the Western calendar.
Moving away from the Russian Orthodox tradition of January 7th.
Precisely. And this calendar change, it isn't merely liturgical. It is a profound act of self-definition.
Distancing the Ukrainian national identity from Moscow?
And aligning firmly with Europe, they're defining their culture and their future, even while they're literally fighting for their existence.
The sources confirm that despite ongoing, highly publicized peace talks, Russia has continued heavy attacks, specifically targeting energy infrastructure. What does that actually mean for the average citizen trying to celebrate?
It means maximizing suffering during the coldest, darkest time of the year. These attacks aren't random. They are strategic, aimed at power grids, heating plants, and substations.
So the consequence is that countless families are spending Christmas Eve and Christmas Day in dark, unheated apartments.
It's psychological warfare. It's aimed at undermining morale and fracturing the home front.
And the reports we have detail specific acts of violence that happened right on Christmas Eve night, proving there was no holiday pause.
The reports were shocking. The sources described the city of Zaporizhia in the southeast being hit by 3 distinct bomb strikes just on Christmas Eve night.
And the result?
Significant damage, at least 4 confirmed injuries, and widely shattered windows across residential areas. One resident was quoted describing the sound as terrible and so loud.
A noise that just obliterates any sense of peace or tradition on a night meant for reflection.
Completely. And the attacks on critical infrastructure continued unabated, plunging major cities into darkness.
Yes, the reports specified that the major port city of Odessa, a vital economic hub, was thrown into complete darkness.
And this wasn't a localized issue. It was the direct result of heavy Russian drone and missile attacks, specifically targeting that energy infrastructure. Imagine being in a large apartment block, trying to prepare a holiday meal or gather with family, when the power, the heat, the light, it all just vanishes because of a strategic strike.
The emotional impact is immense.
And the intensity extends beyond just the major population centers,
The sources noted intensive shelling in the Chernihiv region, north of Kyiv.
which tragically resulted in 2 confirmed deaths. This just emphasizes that the conflict remains widespread, intense, and deeply personal. It's not confined to the front lines. Daily life everywhere is just characterized by instability.
And we should note, this conflict remains intensely kinetic on both sides.
Absolutely. Ukrainian reports claimed Russia launched over 130 drones overnight, while at the same time, Ukraine confirmed launching attacks on an oil refinery on the Russian side. It's a conflict that adheres to no calendar truce.
So, moving from these active conflict zones where violence reigns, we turn now to the high ground of diplomacy and religious authority. Let's focus on the Vatican, and specifically Pope Leo X, who was celebrating his first Christmas in office.
And he immediately signaled a strong return to tradition.
What's truly fascinating about his approach, according to the sources, is that he chose to revive a significant tradition that had been abandoned 30 years ago by Pope John Paul II.
For health reasons, yes.
He personally celebrated both the Christmas Eve Midnight Mass and the Christmas Day service.
By doing this, Leo X is signaling more than just robust health. It's a strong commitment to visible, active leadership during a time of global crisis. He's aiming to reestablish the traditional gravitas of the papacy.
That increased visibility culminated in his traditional blessing, Urbi et Orbi. What exactly does that phrase mean for our listener, and what was the scale of this moment?
Urbi et Orbi literally means to the city of Rome and to the world. It's the most solemn papal blessing delivered on Easter, Christmas, and after a new pope's election.
It's the moment the Pope speaks as a spiritual leader to the entire planet.
That's it. And the sources estimated that 26,000 people gathered in St. Peter's Square, braving the elements, to hear this first major Christmas address from him.
So what was the core message delivered during this highly visible moment?
It was a deeply humanitarian appeal. The central message was a powerful call for global charity and human solidarity.
Yeah.
It was a solemn reminder of continuing crises, and he specifically and prominently mentioned both Ukraine and Gaza.
He prayed very specifically that the roar of weapons may cease.
And beyond just praying for silence, he issued an urgent, actionable plea to all involved parties, backed by the international community, to find the moral and political courage for honest, direct, and respectful dialogue.
So he wasn't just calling for peace, he was calling for a specific kind of engagement.
Yes, but this powerful appeal came immediately after a diplomatic failure regarding a temporary truce.
Right. The sources noted that Pope Leo X expressed his sorrow that Russia had apparently rejected the request for even a temporary Christmas ceasefire.
And that detail is crucial. It underscores this profound gap between the papacy's moral authority and the stark realities of geopolitical calculus.
The fact that he publicly addressed the rejection emphasizes the depth of the disappointment.
And the perceived intransigence of one of the parties. It turns the hopeful message of Urbi et Orbi into a lament over failed diplomacy.
While the Pope was making these moral appeals, President Zelensky was detailing the technical work underway to secure Ukraine's long-term defense,
A completely different level of diplomatic maneuvering.
specifically regarding negotiations on security guarantees with the USA.
This moves the conversation from the aspirational to the architectural. They are trying to build a concrete defense structure. Zelensky made it clear that the specifics of these proposals are advancing.
Designed to provide Ukraine with a long-term defense framework.
Right. Regardless of the immediate conflict status.
And the analogy he used for these guarantees is incredibly revealing. He compared them to the most famous defense clause in the world.
He did. The agreed-upon security guarantees are said to resemble NATO's Mutual Assistance Clause.
Okay, so for the listener, we should probably clarify what that means.
In the context of NATO, that's Article 5. The principle that an attack against one member is considered an attack against all, triggering a collective response.
So if Ukraine is seeking guarantees that resemble that, what does that practically signal about their goal?
It signals a desire for commitment that goes far beyond simple military aid or arms sales. It means Ukraine is aiming for an institutionalized defense mechanism that offers deterrence.
Signaling to Russia that any future aggression will face a predefined, coordinated response.
Exactly. It's an attempt to establish a high level of security commitment, even while they remain outside NATO's formal membership structure. This is the gold standard of defense architecture they are striving for.
However, Zelensky also stressed a critical prerequisite for this diplomatic framework to actually hold any weight.
Yes, a significant caveat. He said the success of these documents depends entirely on ensuring that Russia does not sabotage this diplomacy and takes the termination of the war 100% seriously.
That's a profound statement.
It is, because it acknowledges that the most sophisticated security agreement is worthless if one party is just using diplomatic channels as a stalling tactic while continuing hostilities.
The implication being that concrete action on the ground, an actual cessation of attacks, must precede or accompany the signing of these guarantees.
If they're to be viewed as truly successful and lasting, yes.
The calls for courage and confidence weren't limited to the Vatican or Kiev. We also have details from the Christmas message delivered by German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier.
An appeal to the populace at home.
Yes, and his address was designed to be unifying and grounding during a time of, high domestic anxiety. His core message was an appeal for people to be courageous and confident.
He consciously drew on the traditional Christmas theme that a light shines in the darkness, using that symbolism to inspire civic strength.
And what was the practical application of that courage and confidence according to his address?
He emphasized that confidence empowers people to engage actively with the world and with their fellow human beings. He framed this engagement across a whole spectrum.
From grand politics down to local initiatives.
Right, from the complexities of the international conflicts we've just discussed down to the level of many small local community initiatives. It was a message designed to fight political fatigue and encourage active citizenship.
And these themes of dignity and societal responsibility were strongly echoed within the German church sermons as well.
They were, underscoring the spiritual grounding of these appeals. The sources noted two particularly relevant sermons. Cardinal Rainer Maria Wolke in Cologne delivered a powerful message centered on the concept of human dignity.
He urged people to align their lives with the example of Jesus.
And stressed that human dignity is inherent. It belongs equally to everyone, regardless of their social status, wealth, or religious belief, rich or poor, Christian or not.
That is a fundamental reminder in a climate often characterized by division.
It is. And the other example went even further, directly addressing contemporary social and political exploitation.
The Evangelical Lutheran State Bishop in Munich.
Christian Kopop, yes. He made a very pointed statement, declaring it intolerable on two distinct fronts. First, for Christians to use the season as an opportunity to exploit the needy a criticism of predatory behavior.
And second,
he condemned political parties that seek to devalue and exclude others. Both of these sermons connect the spiritual imperative of the holiday directly to contemporary social ethics, demanding a principled stand against division and exploitation.
Shifting now from moral appeals and geopolitics to hard economics, let's turn our attention back to Germany, because the reports on the Christmas retail season were distinctly disappointing.
They were. This points to a broader global economic malaise. The reality was a major letdown for retailers who really rely on this period.
A critical survey by the German Trade Association revealed significant dissatisfaction.
A full two-thirds of retailers expressed unhappiness with the sales results. That signals deep trouble in one of the world's major economies during its most important consumption quarter.
And the retailers cited a few key factors for this poor consumption climate. It sounds like a perfect storm of anxiety.
It was a combination of persistent pressures. The primary reasons were the rising cost of living. So, basic necessities were eating up more of people's income, and crucially, this ongoing uncertainty about future economic stability.
So when consumers lack confidence, they cut back on discretionary spending.
Exactly. And that hits gifts and non-essential retail the hardest.
We have hard data that captures this tightening of the belts.
The data is stark. Shoppers consciously plan to spend significantly less on gifts. The average planned expenditure dropped to €263.
Down from nearly 300 the previous year.
That's roughly a 12% drop, which is enormous in aggregate for the retail sector. It shows that consumers are budgeting fiercely,
viewing the money saved as a necessary buffer against future instability.
rather than prioritizing holiday spending, yes.
But amidst this widespread downturn, we saw one retail niche remain surprisingly robust.
The book trade. The sources noted that book sales remained relatively crisis-proof, and the analysis for this resilience is fascinating.
People seek escape in uncertain times.
Precisely. Buying books, what the sources called dreaming into other worlds, is an affordable, accessible form of psychological relief.
And the prices hadn't risen as sharply.
Right. Compared to electronics or clothing, the price of books was more stable, making them an attractive and safe gifting option.
The narrative of the poor German retail performance wasn't entirely domestic, however. The trade association pointed a massive finger at foreign competition,
Specifically from Chinese online platforms.
calling it a glaring distortion of competition. This is where the global digital economy meets local storefront survival.
This is one of the most important takeaways in the entire deep dive because it represents a structural transformation. The core challenge comes from massive Chinese online platforms selling goods at incredibly low prices.
Everything from toys and clothing to cheap electronics.
And local established retailers simply cannot compete with that pricing structure and scale.
Let's focus on the scale of that influx. The number quoted by the trade association is just staggering.
It is genuinely transformative. The trade association estimated that 6 billion small packages arrived directly from China into Europe this year alone.
6 billion packages.
Just think about that. It highlights an unprecedented level of low-friction, high-volume, cross-border commerce. The logistics required to handle that are staggering, but so is the economic impact on the receiving countries.
And the German retail industry isn't calling this free market competition, they're calling it illegal. What's the mechanism behind that strong claim?
They argue that this constitutes a glaring distortion of competition, because these platforms often exploit regulatory loopholes. The claim of illegal products usually refers to several areas.
Such as?
1. Skirting established customs and VAT regulations due to the low-value nature of the individual packages. 2. Violating established EU product safety standards for toys or electronics. And 3. Selling outright counterfeit goods.
While established German retailers have to adhere to stringent labor laws, quality control, tax codes.
They feel they're operating on an entirely different playing field.
So what's the final analysis for the German retail sector, given this pressure?
The Trade Association called 2025 a lost year for retail. They predicted a maximum sales increase of just 1.5% over the previous year.
Which doesn't even compensate for inflation.
Not even close. When you factor in the rising costs of doing business, that 1.5% increase means that in real purchasing power terms, the sector actually contracted. This massive, low-friction international commerce, propelled by those 6 billion packages, is now posing a fundamental threat to the stability of established national retail economies.
Now for a completely different kind of international friction, shifting from physical goods to digital speech. The controversy surrounding the German anti-hate speech initiative, HateAids.
A unique political flare-up right in the heart of two allied Western democracies.
It's a fascinating, complex case that highlights the deep philosophical rift between U.S. and European views on digital speech regulation.
It does. The core conflict is that the U.S. State Department issued an entry ban against the two managing directors of HateAids, Annalena von Hodenberg and Josephine Ballon.
And the official U.S. justification was a direct accusation of internet censorship.
That's right. The U.S. position views the actions of HateAids, specifically their methods for identifying and seeking legal action against online hate speech, as an infringement on fundamental freedoms of expression.
A very strong political accusation.
Aimed squarely at an organization that considers its work vital to protecting democratic dialogue.
And the German response was immediate and defensive.
German Justice Minister Hubich called the U.S. action unacceptable, signaling a major diplomatic disagreement between allies over who defines appropriate digital conduct.
And HateAids offered a detailed defense.
They countered the censorship claim by stating they don't delete speech or moderate platforms. Rather, they provide legal assistance to victims of hate speech, enabling those victims to exercise their legal rights in court.
So they see themselves as protecting the vulnerable and upholding the rule of law.
Not silencing discourse, no.
And the high profile of the organization in Germany makes the U.S. action particularly dramatic.
It does. We need to contextualize this for the global listener. Annalena von Hodenberg, one of the band directors, was awarded the Federal Cross of Merit just 2 months prior.
Germany's highest civilian honor.
Exactly. Recognizing exceptional services to the nation. So for the German government to bestow its highest honor and for the U.S. government to simultaneously sanction them as agents of censorship, it just reveals a profound transatlantic political and philosophical divide on the role of digital regulation.
And the managing director stated publicly that they would not be intimidated,
emphasizing their determination to continue their work, despite the diplomatic pressure.
After all that conflict and economic stress, it's important we find the threads of human connection and resilience running through these sources.
And one beautiful example is the enduring German radio tradition, Grüßen Bord, or Greetings on Board.
This is a remarkable piece of cultural history that has persisted for over 70 years.
Since 1953, it's a program by the NDR radio network that uses shortwave radio and almost antique technology to send Christmas greetings specifically to seafarers scattered across the world's oceans.
In a world where we can instantly video call someone from the middle of the Pacific, why do the sources suggest this specific old-school radio broadcast still carries such massive emotional weight?
It's about the tradition and the unique reach of shortwave. For many seafarers who are often isolated and working during the holidays, this broadcast represents a collective shared moment.
A campfire moment, I think it was described as.
That's a great way to put it. It is a personal message cutting across thousands of miles of cold water, making the enormous world feel small and connected. It's not just a technological connection, it's a spiritual and cultural lifeline.
And the source material gave us a fantastic anecdote that captures the emotional power of this tradition, focusing on Captain Axel Rotermund.
Captain Rotermund was on a 25-day container ship voyage bound for San Antonio, Chile, crossing the vast Atlantic. This journey was the culmination of his life's work, a lifelong dream, 20 years in the making.
His first trip as captain.
His first trip. And the fact that this milestone coincided with Christmas made the loneliness of the sea even more acute.
So his parents, Telly and Volker Rotermund, were at the recording studio in Hamburg, thinking they were simply upholding tradition by sending their son a greeting.
They were utterly unprepared for what happened next. Axel, the captain, had secretly called in live from his position far out on the Atlantic to surprise them during the broadcast.
You can just imagine the scene.
The sources detailed the explosion of emotion, the parents' confused joy, exclaiming, "That's him, that can't be Axel, hello, fantastic, hello." It's a powerful illustration of how technology, even simple, reliable technology like shortwave, can breach immense distance to facilitate deep, unforgettable human connection.
Shifting to cultural memory, the sources took a moment to reflect on the death of a significant figure in German media and culture. The actor Uwe Kockisch, who passed away recently at 81.
It's important to pause and acknowledge those who shape our shared cultural landscape. In Kockisch's career, it really spanned the entire political landscape of modern Germany.
His life was a fascinating mirror of the nation's history.
It really was.
Let's detail his early life, specifically in the GDR, because it contains a highly formative political event.
Kockisch was born in Kappes in 1944. A defining moment in his youth was his attempt to flee the German Democratic Republic in 1961, right as the Berlin Wall was being erected.
The attempt was unsuccessful.
It was, and it resulted in him serving 6 months in prison. That period of personal resistance and institutional punishment surely shaped the depth and resilience of his character later on.
But despite that setback, he eventually rose through the theatrical ranks.
He did, starting at the Kappes State Theater as an extra and wardrobe assistant before becoming a respected actor by 1967. He later spent over 20 years as a pillar of the Maxim Gorki Theater in Berlin.
His national breakthrough came after the reunification, which is often a tough transition for East German actors.
Incredibly tough. But he successfully transitioned to film and television in the 1990s, becoming recognized first as Kommissario Zek, and later for his portrayal of a complex Stasi officer in the acclaimed series Weissensee.
And for his work, he received the prestigious Grimm Prize in 2008.
A mark of high respect in the German television industry.
But the role that defined him for millions of years across the continent came relatively late in life.
His most famous role was indeed the quiet, thoughtful Commissario Guido Brunetti in the Don Leon crime series. He took on that character starting in 2003 when he was nearly 60 years old.
And he played him until he was 75.
He famously described himself as, "I am the oldest beginner there is." That humility and late-stage success made him incredibly relatable and beloved.
Why was that transition from GDR to unified German television so difficult? And why was his success so notable?
It was difficult because the aesthetics, the market demands, the political sensitivities were all vastly different. Many actors from the East were often typecast or found their style too rooted in the old system.
And Kockisch managed to shed that historical baggage.
He did. And his Brunetti character, a quiet, humanist detective navigating the moral ambiguities of Venice, was the perfect vehicle for his mature talent. He demonstrated a rare ability to adapt and achieve broad, lasting success.
The sources noted he had privately moved to live in Madrid,
ending his life far from the theaters of his youth. A remarkable journey.
Now we circle back one last time to global instability, moving past man-made conflict and economic pressures to face the raw power of nature.
A stark reminder that life's biggest challenges rarely take a holiday.
During the holidays, the U.S. West Coast, specifically California, was dealing with catastrophic unseasonal weather.
Severe unseasonal weather-heavy rains and strong winds slammed Los Angeles and large sections of California right on Christmas Eve. The consequences were immediate and tragic.
The sources confirmed at least 2 deaths and widespread destruction.
The impacts were extensive: severe flooding, dangerous mudslides, and massive infrastructure failures, primarily power outages. The sources noted that over 100,000 households were left without electricity during the height of the storm.
And one fatality was specifically attributed to excessive speed on a wet roadway.
A driver losing control and hitting a pole. It highlights the sheer peril of the driving conditions.
Here's the critical element that ties this event to the broader climate crisis: the danger posed by areas previously affected by wildfires.
This is the most critical and specific danger emphasized by authorities. Areas recently scarred by wildfires are highly vulnerable to catastrophic flash mudslides.
Can you explain that mechanism?
When soil is severely burned, the intense heat creates a hydrophobic layer. It repels water rather than absorbing it. So instead of soaking in, the massive influx of rainwater runs off immediately, destabilizing the slopes.
Turning hillsides into deadly rivers of mud and debris.
Exactly. It creates a life-threatening domino effect rooted in previous climate-driven disasters.
Governor Gavin Newsom responded by declaring a state of emergency. What does that declaration actually facilitate?
Declaring a state of emergency is a procedural necessity. It allows the rapid deployment of state and federal resources, emergency funding, and logistical support, bypassing bureaucratic delays.
To manage large-scale evacuations, rescues, and immediate cleanup.
Right. And the authorities were very clear in their warnings. Stay home. They explicitly urged drivers, do not cross a closed or flooded road, turn around, stressing that drowning is a clear and present danger in these conditions.
It's an incredible contrast to shift from that destructive, unseasonal warmth and rain in California to the traditional European desire for a white Christmas.
A wish that was realized only in very limited pockets of Europe. The sources indicate that meaningful snow coverage was confined mostly to a few high-altitude regions in southern Germany.
So places like Uttenweiler and near the Tegernsee saw snow.
Yes, but it wasn't the widespread blanket coverage many hoped for.
Let's look at the specific European weather snapshot for Christmas Day and the following days. What kind of air mass was dominating?
A mass of cold, dry air was prevailing across much of Central Europe. The forecast for December 25th and 26th showed an enormous temperature range, which really speaks to the geographical diversity of the continent.
Overnight lows were drastically cold.
Ranging from just above freezing, +1 degree C near the north coast, down to a frigid -12 degrees C in the high-altitude Erzgebirge Mountains.
That's the remote region bordering the Czech Republic.
That's the one. And the daytime highs were just as varied. The sources noted highs ranging from -6 degrees C in the Thuringian Basin, a low-lying, often cloudy region that stays below freezing all day, up to +5 degrees C in the mid-altitude Alps where the sunshine was strongest.
So cold, but often sunny.
Unless you were stuck under a patch of fog, yes. Patches of gray cloud and fog persisted, especially near bodies of water and in lower elevations. But overall, it was a picture of stable, dry, and distinctly cold weather.
Confirming that while snow was scarce, the feeling of a harsh winter was certainly present.
Especially in the mountains, absolutely.
Right, that brings us to the synthesis of this deep dive. When we connect all these disparate threads pulled from the source material, from Bethlehem to Berlin, from Ukraine to California, the tension of Christmas 2025 is starkly clear.
It is a profound study in contradiction. We witness the power of the global call for peace, the bright lights of Bethlehem contrasting with its recent trauma, the moral voice of Pope Leo X, pleading for dialogue.
But we saw that moral authorities struggle against the reality of ongoing conflict in Ukraine, where targeted attacks plunge cities into calculated darkness.
Exactly. And these geopolitical conflicts are overlaid by internal economic pressures. We observe the contraction in German retail, a disappointment driven not just by local budgets, but by a fundamental disruptive shift in global commerce.
Which leads directly to the core insight about the 6 billion packages.
And finally, the challenges aren't confined to human conflicts or economic shifts. The catastrophic flooding in California, amplified by the permanent scars of prior wildfires, serves as a powerful reminder that climate instability is a persistent, defining threat.
Yet, woven into all of this, we found cultural resilience.
The deep emotional connection enabled by a 70-year-old shortwave radio show and the quiet dignity of a beloved actor's legacy.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? What's the final takeaway we can extract from these sources about the structure of our global reality right now?
Well, the sources illustrate that traditional moments of global unity like Christmas, they don't stop the world's fundamental challenges, they merely frame them. But if we focus on that monumental economic friction point, the 6 billion packages, it raises a question that will define the next decade of global governance.
The hyper-globalization of commerce outstripping regulation.
Right. If the rise of incredibly low-cost, frictionless international platforms is redefining retail, harming local businesses, and enabling the mass delivery of goods to the extent that it renders an entire year lost, what does this imply for future regulatory stability?
How to establish national economies founded on fair competition and consumer protection protect their foundational businesses when faced with a commerce system operating at this unprecedented scale and price point?
A system often sidestepping the very regulations that local businesses must abide by.
A challenging thought to carry forward. When global commerce moves 6 billion packages faster than global policy, what fundamental element of national economic stability gives way?
Something for you to explore as the year turns.